Hello everyone, Aussie Dude 25 is back live with another review, and this tonight is not based on a film, but it's also based actually on a TV show, and actually one of my favourite shows of all time. So tonight I'm going to talk about Ashes to Ashes. Basically, long story short, it's based on a 1980s cop show, or based on the 1980s cops based in Fenchurch East, North London. It's based on a sequel from back in 2003 called Life on Mars, following on from three certain characters that you have to follow: Gene Hunt, Christopher Skelton, and obviously his Sergeant Ray Carlin. Basically, long story short, Ashes to Ashes is based on long story short, really difficult. Based from the sequel Life on Mars. Basically, is the aftermath of Sam Tyler, and basically we get to understand what the world is. We get to meet a very special character. We get to meet what's her name, Alex Drake, who's actually Sam Tyler's psychologist. Basically, Sam Tyler, after he came back from World War, back into it, he left all his notes about what he experienced to Alex Drake, and explained that he was in a coma after he had a car accident, but experienced living the life of the 1970s. And eventually he decided to commit suicide at the time and go back to the 1970s to save his friends. And he actually lived in that I don't know what it was. I'll probably say it's like purgatory between the two. So it was between heaven and hell, but basically like a world that someone else made up. So Sam lived there for 8 years. And Ashes to Ashes, the sequel, was actually after Sam disappeared, which was in 1980, instead of where the actual stories for Ashes to Ashes starts in 1981. So long story short, it's a 3-part series based on Alex Drake. See, if you haven't seen it before, I guarantee you to watch it. And if you don't want any spoilers, do not watch this review. Actually, no, I'm joking. Watch it anyway and see what you think, and just let me know. So season 1's based on Alex Drake's history. So basically, when she was a young girl, her parents got blown up in a car, and she never understood why. For some reason, in the beginning, when she's driving her daughter to school, someone from her past called Arthur Layton, who was actually a drug overlord, decided to shoot Alex on the head. And when she wakes up in 1981, what she doesn't realise, she apparently thinks that she simulated Sam Tyler's fantasy world, which is actually the purgatory world between heaven and hell, and where she meets Gene Hunt, Christopher Skelton, and Ray Carlin. And at that time, obviously, at that current time, police were actually undergoing some formalities and policies and procedures which were different in 1973 when Sam Tyler was. And obviously then they would change everything. That's when policing actually changed at that time as well. Like stop and search, obviously affected policing powers and everything else as well. So Alex Drake's season 1 basically was trying to find out what was going on with her parents. So find out the reality of what happened to them, why did they get blown up by a car bomb, and what's Arthur Layton got anything to do with it. There was a special figure in this thing. There was like a clown chasing Alex all over the place in that particular world. So basically, the reality was, or the spoiler is, that the clown is actually her father. So basically what he does is, he explains that her godfather, when she was younger, actually had an affair with her mum. And basically, her father found out about it and decided, you know what, we're not going to have someone destroy our happiness and peacefulness. And obviously, that's why he decided to get Arthur Layton, who actually shot Alex in the head, to actually rig a car and make it explode. Basically, Arthur Layton blackmailed I can't remember the guy's name. His name was Evan. His name was Evan Price. Basically, Alex's godfather when she was a young girl, and actually godfather to Alex's daughter in the future. So basically, Arthur Layton blackmailed him to say, "I've got a piece of your past here. I'm going to tear everything. What actually happened to her parents?" At that time, she gets to work with Gene Hunt, who's actually moved from Manchester to London at Fenchurch East, and obviously at the time, DC Skelton, which is Chris, and also Ray Carlin, who's also a detective sergeant. Long story short, both the characters have developed a lot more. So what's happened is they decided to... Gene's more procedure now, but he's still fighting the main lion. Ray is more... He still follows procedure, follows his gov everywhere, so he follows the rules and everything. And also Chris is more cautious instead of nervous. So either way, he decided, you know what, I'm going to look at everything first before I decide to go gun blazing in. The action itself is fantastic. The storyline actually leads to Alex meeting her mum a lot more, also meeting her godfather a lot more. We don't really see the father till the end of the season. Probably see like episode 8, because it's 8 episode series. And what happens is there's a lot of storylines in this. One of them was, the first episode was based on Arthur Layton when he was in his early days as a drug overlord. Eventually it came to like governmental secrets as well. And also it came to some people trying to take over the streets, for example, trying to hide guns and everything else altogether. Eventually, at the end of season 1, Alex recognises, she comes to the part where she's on the other side of the track and she sees what happens to her parents. She doesn't know who was holding her hand as a young girl, but what she was shocked to see, Gene Hunt was actually the character. She thought he was imaginary, but he wasn't. He was actually the person holding her hand when she was a young girl, so she couldn't understand why it was happening. So after that, and obviously Evan discovered why Timothy Price, which is Alex's father, was so keen to get Leighton out of the Scrubs, as they call it. So Scrubs is obviously, they call it back then, one of the main prisons, such as like Selhurst and Broadmoor, for example. And eventually, Alex decided to, Alex found out, obviously, they covered it up, so they destroyed the tape, explaining why Tim did it, and obviously he knew about the affair from Evan and stuff like that. And eventually, Alex decided to keep, Alex knew she had to get back to her daughter, Molly, after she'd been shot in the head, but obviously she had to stay in the world a bit longer before she could actually go back. So season 1 ended knowing more about Alex's past, of why her parents were killed in the first place. So that was it. Season 2, 1982. So this season was based more on corruption on the Met. So long story short, it was based on the Masons and also like Secret Handshake, Brotherhood, obviously corruption in the Met, like gold bullion job, obviously corrupt police officers and everything like that. Alex met another police officer who actually had trauma. I can't remember what he had. I think he'd been hit by a car as well. He had some kind of accident. He was an ex-copper, and basically he ended up in the same world as Alex. However, 1982 was a special year for this guy, because at that time, corruption was very big in the Met around that time. So what happens, Alex started to forget where she was coming from. She started to forget her daughter's face. She could only remember her mum by chatting to her, and that was literally it. Alex was starting to forget who she was. And her lifeline was starting to go. By season 3, she thought episode 3, she thought she came back to the real world, but she didn't. So basically it was she had been found and trying to resuscitate her. However, her lifeline was coming and going, so she was starting to fade away, and she got back stronger again. Half the season is based on trying to figure out one particular character called Sergeant McIntosh. Basically, Sergeant McIntosh was actually the ringleader, or one of the main corrupt police officers of the whole of London, and basically he was running things. And he had a lot of money. He was a very clever man to hide all his money with one particular person. And how he did that, he covered up someone else's crime back in 1977, but at that time he used that connection to let the other person get away with anything, like any crime they did. They eventually figured it out, and eventually there was a main operation which was being built up for the last 2 years, they said. It was called Operation Rose, and no one knew what the Rose word meant. What it was, every time that someone said the word Rose, that it meant like corrupt coppers. So we didn't know who wasn't corrupt and who wasn't corrupt and who was corrupt. So that was the main problem. One of the main characters, I think it was Chris Skelton. Basically, Chris Skelton was he borrowed a loan off someone, and basically they were connected to Operation Rose. So basically they kept asking them favours to get rid of evidence, help something out, one particular job, and eventually he got found out as the mole in Fenchurch East. From episode 1 to episode 4, it was based on one particular character trying to bring him to court, bring him to justice and everything, and it eventually did happen because the character actually killed himself off. And then episode 5 to 8 is all about Operation Rose. The main copper who actually met Alex in the future was Martin Summers. Basically, in 1982, it was a special year for him because that's when he was a young copper who actually been, like Chris Skelton, he had been tricked into helping corrupt coppers, and that's why he decided, because he knew everything about Operation Rose, he decided to augment it, the whole operation. Overall storyline, basically Gene Hunt was a constant presence again. He found out the relationship between him and Alex Drake started to, I'm trying to think of the word, started to deteriorate. So basically, Martin Somers was trying to set up Alex, make it look like she was the bad person, and eventually she told Gene the truth, that she was from the future. She was trying to get back to her daughter, and she'd been shot in her hand. She doesn't know what this world is at all. She had no clue. Season finale ended up with obviously Chris being accepted back into the Met, Chris Skelton, and obviously what happened is as well, Gene decided he actually believed Alex in the end, and eventually he accidentally shot her when she was being held hostage. At the end of that, Alex woke up in the year 2006, 2007 from her coma after being shot in the head. So 2 seasons, she's come back to reality. However, there's a shocker. She's in a coma in 1982. So she's thinking, oh, blimey, where am I? So in that world, I'm in a coma. In 2006, I'm back. However, I could see Gene Hunt on the TV, and she's like, oh my God, I'm going crazy. She just disappears. That ends up on that stage. To be honest here, between season 1 and 2, I thought they would have left it like they did Life on Mars. However, it was the build up to the massive finale, which you didn't expect. So, season 3. At the beginning, there's a grave being found. Alex is still in a coma in 1983, so she's been in a coma for a good 3 or 4 months. So she sent her daughter away to go and live with her father in Canada, and basically what happened was she didn't know whether the world she was in now was an illusion or whether it was real or not. It was definitely like 2008. London Soho, that's where she was standing, and all of a sudden she's in a prison cell. She sees this police officer who's got a massive wound on his face, and what happened was she looks through the gap of the prison door and she sees herself in a hospital bed where she sees the TV and sees the 905, which is kind of shocking. And basically a new character joins the team, and not joins the team, he's from back then they called it Discipline and Complaints. I think they still call it, I don't know what they call it. They call it DNC. DCI Jim Keats. Basically, he was there to clean up Fenchurches of all the paperwork and everything and make sure they were following everything by procedure and implementing the new procedures. However, he was actually there to uncover the truth about Sam Tyler and actually expose Gene Hunt for what he really was. Jim Keats, there's not much history about him, unfortunately. Basically, he's a DCI, but obviously he's in the complaint department. From what I've watched and what I've seen, he considered. There's a lot of references when he goes back to the Bible, like the devil side, like 666. What it was, season 3 finally explained what the whole world was. What happened was the spirit of Gene Hunt. He was actually shot in 1953. 1953, and basically since then he had waken up and he made up his own fantasy or something. So he's been given a job as an angel, and then he made up his own little world, but he actually forgot who he was. So over a year of 30 years, he decided to. He became a DCI, and he forgot what happened to him. It was like bang, done, and then he woke up in his own little fantasy. He forgot completely who he was. The main storyline really is about Sam Tyler. What happened to Sam Tyler? Why did he disappear? Why can't no one find him? It wasn't just him. It was also his wife, Annie, was actually part of Life on Mars. So it was kind of like, oh, blimey, where are the 2 other main characters gone? No one knew. And that's why Jim Keats was there. The storylines in season 3, there was a lot. There was like fire rescue. There was the Stafford family who were trying to rule London. There was prison fights and stuff like that. Obviously, trying to get Gene away from DNC when he went on the run to actually make sure he doesn't get arrested or get discharged from his job and everything, as they said back then. And obviously, kidnappings as well. Eventually, in episode 8, the whole truth is revealed. Gene, when Alex finds Gene's grave, she thinks it's actually Sam's grave. It's not. It's actually Gene's grave as a young copper. she picks up a warrant card which shows Gene as his young self back in like the younger days in 1953. Gene enters the house where his murder actually happened, thinking, "Oh wow, it's actually coming back to me." Eventually, Jim turns up, and Jim's hiding in the darkness in the corner, and he finally exposed Gene as he is. Jim knew who Gene was, but Gene couldn't remember who Jim Keats was. That was the problem. He had like a funny feeling, but it's like the truth finally came, and Gene started to remember stuff slowly. What it is, the world itself is actually a world of limbo, where police officers who had massive trauma, like being hit by a car or had a massive or gun to the head or massive or being stabbed or anything like that, they were put into a world where they could find themselves. Like they would go back to their old history. They would be what their rank was. So like Alex Drake was a detective inspector. She was a detective inspector in 1981 to 1983. And eventually it was revealed that 3 other characters from Ashes to Ashes were actually dead as well on the whole show. So Ray Carlin was, Chris Skelton was, and also the person who's about to be promoted to Detective Constable, Shaz Granger, was actually passed away as well. So all 4 of them actually had some massive trauma event. Like Chris was shot down in 1975, Shaz was stabbed in 1995, and Ray, unfortunately, I can't remember what happened to Ray. Ray had a massive trauma event after he beat up a lad in 1976. So he woke up about a few years before. And obviously Alex got shot in the head in 2005. No, not 2005. 2005, my apologies. Yeah, so at the end, basically, Gene finally remembers he's an angel is actually meant to look after. It's like purgatory, but it's a good purgatory. It's like a world of limbo, so that's where the officers go to find themselves. When they watch the videos of how they died, they're thinking, oh my God, I finally remembered. And every time when their character got stronger, they kept hearing a background voice. And it's actually one of the original characters who actually ran a pub back in Manchester called the Railway Arms. His name was Nelson, and actually Nelson was the guardian angel to the pub, to the door of heaven. So eventually what happened was when Jim Keats tried to take the 3 other characters, he tried to take them down to hell because they could hear screaming. He typed in 666 on the door, and obviously the elevator coming up was actually coming from hell, and eventually they decided to go back with Gene. Gene, at the end, obviously after one last crime prevention, I think it was something to do with diamond smuggling and stuff like that in the park, basically took him to the pub, and that was actually the doorway to heaven where Sam had gone, and Annie as well. And eventually Chris, Ray and Shaz all went through the door and actually went straight through heaven. As soon as you saw them go through the white light of door, their thing just disappeared. That was it. They were gone. And Gene and Alex maintained to stay behind. However, Alex wanted to stay to help Gene out because she didn't want him to be alone. And eventually Jim Keats turned up, and eventually he said, I can bring you to your daughter, Alex. But unfortunately, Alex already passed away at 9:05. So basically, at the end of season 2, when she thought she woke up, she actually passed away at 9:05 on the dot. And you think, so is your watch still working? No, it isn't. And eventually Gene smacked Jim, and that was it. Game over. The devil. Jim was actually the devil. Jim actually lost. So this time around, Gene won as an angel, but the devil lost to 4 more souls of the police force who had trauma. At the end, Alex decided to go through the pub door to heaven, and yeah, that's what happened. So basically, Gene was on his own again. He remembered his past, he remembered his young self, and what he decided to do, decided to stay behind, look after the world of limbo again, and it started another cycle. So someone else had another trauma accident and woke up in 1983, and it's a detective inspector, and he said the same words to Sam Tyler like he did to Alex Drake, and he said the same words to this third guy, a word in your shell like, pal. And that was it. That kind of ended the series, the whole sequel to the whole lot. So like Life of Mars, Ashes to Ashes, and it finally made sense. There was a few questions that still need to be answered. That they said, what was Gene Hunt? How come he couldn't remember his past and everything? A lot of people don't know the answer to that question. Even myself, I've looked online. I think it was because he didn't realise how quickly it happened. That's how quick it happened to him. And Jim Keats, do you know what? If they did another season, it'd be interesting to see how they did it if they did it in the 90s. Did Gina remember? Is it worth it? You never know. They might do it again. I very much doubt it. I have no idea. So, from my point of view, it's probably one of the. It's very, very funny, and there's a lot of comedy in it, and there's a lot of there's a lot of storylines to it as well. And it all builds up. So, from Aussie Dude 25 review, I'll probably give it 8.5 out of 10. The reason why I don't give it, nine out of 10 or 10 out of 10 is because I prefer. It's one of my favourite shows of all time. However, I always like the original. I always like the prequel. So, like, Life on Mars was one of my favourite ones to watch, where Ashes to Ashes had a lot more action into it, and it's a good build up to the trilogy. So, yeah, guys, it's definitely a recommended watch to watch. Sorry, Ashes to Ashes. Watch it. You know what? It's one of those things you either something you put in the background, but you can just sit there for hours and just watch it, and while you know it, you've watched the whole season, which is fantastic. So, Ashes to Ashes review completed. Guys, my next review is going to be on Prometheus, the film, and I hope you have enjoyed this review. So I'll let you know when I'm ready to do my Prometheus review soon, and have a good evening. Speak to you soon. Bye!